Thank you so much for joining us. We are Ray Olson Family Financial Planning, and today we're going to be doing a webinar on estate planning. We have all of our webinars recorded, and it includes the tax planning one, Social Security. We did what comes next as we age, where we had a professional come in and talk with us, Jen Dowda. So that's just a few of them. Those are all housed on our website, rayolson.net. So you can always go back and take a look at that information. If there is any topic that's not included in today's presentation, feel free to reach out to us. We want you to feel informed on this topic so you can plan for your future and continue setting goals. Cooper Casillas is going to be your host as usual. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to him.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Rob. And again, thank everyone for taking the time. What we're going to cover today is estate planning. And as a disclaimer, I'm going to say this first and foremost, I am not an attorney. I am not legally able to give any legal advice, right? This is just me on a general education level. And because of that, I can't get into, a lot of specifics, right? But I'm going to try to cover the basics and maybe cover some strategies that we help clients with and help coach them through, maybe on like the tax side and kind of investment side as well. So estate planning, it can be complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible, cover, what it is, why it's important, how you can best utilize it with your plan, and so on and so forth. So to do that, I'm going to have to start by, just giving you maybe a basic education fundamentals covering estate planning 101, and then I can stack on top of it of the taxes and how to best maybe transfer your wealth and cover digital assets as well, because that's increasingly more important in today's world. We also have a tool called Everplans that I want to show today. Many of you probably have been introduced to it already, but it's a really valuable tool that I want to mention. And then as life changes, what could warrant you needing to change your estate plan or your estate planning documents? And how often should you just regularly review those documents? So want to cover all of that. And jumping into things again on the kind of the estate 101, right? First and foremost, any estate plan, you're going to have to get started with kind of this holy trinity of documents: your power of attorneys, POAs, your medical directives, and your wills. Right? This is honestly one of the hardest things for me to get clients to do, because I think naturally, I think we just kind of put it on the back burner, and it's like, hey, I don't really have to worry about this right now. I'm young. I don't have any intentions of dying anytime soon, and nor do I even want to think about me dying. But it is super, super important because life happens, things happen. And if you don't have a plan in place, you don't have these documents in place, then the state and the court system is going to decide who gets what. Right. And that's not ideal. So you get started by establishing your POAs, your medical directives, your wills. Most people on this call should know what these documents are, but your POA covers more financial and legal decisions, right? So you designate a trusted individual, could be family, friend, or anyone else, that you would again trust to make decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. And that's, again, more so for financial and legal. Your medical directives cover the health. So something happens, you get in a car accident, you're in a coma, you can't make decisions. Well, someone has to instruct the doctors. Someone has to make medical decisions for you. If you don't have a medical directive in place, the doctors, they can't do what they do best, right? And they can't take instruction. And then your will, again, most people should know what a will is, but just a legal binding document that outlines how your assets should be distributed upon your passing. Okay. So in your will, you are going to designate, again, another trusted individual, an executor. And that executor is responsible for carrying out all of the intentions that you wrote down in your will. And so all those assets that you left over are considered your estate. Okay. And your executor is now responsible for managing your estate. So that includes transferring assets to your heirs. It can include liquidating assets like your home, like and coordinating that. It can be helping with, filing an estate tax return if it's needed, and just coordinating all of those affairs, right? And a lot of times your executor is also going to have to help your estate go through the probate process. And probate, again, keeping it as simple as possible, is just a system that we developed that essentially formalizes all of your intentions in your will and legalizes it and legalizes that transfer. So again, a formal process that goes through the court system, and it's honestly a beneficial process and kind of a necessary evil. But there are some drawbacks to probate. One of those can be, obviously, again, you're going through a court system. Probate can take 6 months to even over a year, depending on the complexity of the case and how busy the court system is. And with that, you're going to have to pay certain administrative costs. You're going to have attorney fees. You could have CPA fees to file the estate tax return. You could have court fees, right? So that can be thousands of dollars. And then also, when it comes to probate, it's going through a court system. So there can be some privacy concerns too, because technically it's all public information, right? So what a lot of people will do is they'll say, I don't really love the idea of my heirs having to go through probate. What can I do to avoid that process altogether? Okay. And the way you do that is through these three different bullet points right here. You have your TOD, your POD, which stands for transfer on death or payable on death. And essentially, it is a designation you can add to, let's say, your investment account or your bank account. Bank accounts are PODs, investment accounts are TODs, or even like your real estate. So you can put a TOD on your residence. And what that will do is it will automatically transfer that asset that you add it to your heirs without having to go through probate. Okay. And in addition to that, even if you were to write something differently in your will, this actually supersedes that. So if you put a TOD on your investment account that it's supposed to go to your 3 kids, and in your will, you actually only have 2 kids in your will. Well, because you have this TOD, that supersedes this. Okay. So it's something to keep in mind, that these are kind of over your will. And the same thing goes for your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, and any life insurance policies. You can explicitly add beneficiary designations that skip probate altogether and supersede the will. Okay. And then there are certain assets that can't be covered with these different designations. One example might be vehicles, right? And so you have some nice vehicles. You can't really add a POD or TOD on those. And what about like art or collectibles or, stuff that you have? You can't add designations on those. So what you can do is you can actually put those in a trust instead and completely bypass probate altogether. Okay. So there are a lot of different types of trusts, and there are misconceptions when it comes to forming trusts, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. And the main 2 reasons that anyone on this call would probably use a trust is, one, to bypass probate altogether, and 2, it almost says, I don't trust you, or I don't trust my heirs, and so I want to have more control and flexibility over distributions upon my passing. So if you have these beneficiary designations set up, or you have your will set up, what happens when you pass away is those assets are automatically transferred to your kids and your heirs immediately after your passing. Your trust allows you to actually control the when as well. So you can say, hey, I don't know if, my son who's 22 years old should be inheriting $1 million, right now. I actually want to maybe say, hey, at 25, he gets this amount of money, and at 35, he gets this amount of money. Or I want to earmark certain funds for his education. or for maybe a first down payment on a house. So the trust gives you a lot more control and flexibility over those distributions, and it bypasses probate. Now, there are a lot of other reasons that why people would create trusts, but to keep it as simple as possible, those are the two main reasons that I see when working with clients. Um, and there's, again, a lot of different types of trusts, but a lot of people can get a little bit mixed up on and think that if I put something in a trust or I create a trust, I lose control over that altogether. And that's not the case, because there are revocable trusts where you still retain control, and irrevocable trusts where you do lose control. So you can create a revocable trust and accomplish those goals and still have access to that money. The only reason you would use a irrevocable trust is for a reason here, and I'll get in a second. But before I go there, just the last thing on here, again, on the basics, is we want to make sure that we're setting up guardianship as well. So I called this kind of the Holy Trinity, but I would honestly loop in this as well if you have kids who are under 18. Because if you do not set who your guardian should be for your kids, the state is going to decide who gets to take care of them. And a lot of times, and we've seen this, is who you might want to take care of your kids is not who the state would decide who can take care of your kids. And if you don't have that documented and outlined, then your intentions are not going to be granted. So again, just kind of basics there, but let's get into more some of the fun stuff and like planning. And this is where I can get geeked out. So estate taxes, right? Um, Estate taxes, they're its own separate animal. They work completely differently than your normal kind of taxes that you pay on your wages and investments and things like that. So we kind of have to separate it a little bit. And again, I get the question a lot of like, if I were to inherit $1 million from my parents, how much inheritance taxes do I have to pay? Okay. And that's a tax again on the transfer of the money. Okay. And the answer that I give to 99.99% of folks is that you won't pay any inheritance tax on it. And the reason behind that is because the federal government has outlined that the first $13.99 million that you gift the next generation per person, so if it's a married couple, that's $28 million, right? All of that is inheritance tax free. Okay. So again, you inherit $1 million. Well, that doesn't even come close to what this exemption amount is, and you do not have to pay any estate taxes on that. And for Virginia, there is no state tax, even if it's above that threshold of 13.99 million. So I think there's 12 states that do have estate taxes. Virginia and for Joel and Sally there in North Carolina, North Carolina does not have estate taxes either, but that's one benefit there. So again, you're really not having to worry about this unless you're in the 0.01%. And in addition to this exemption amount, you can also gift any individual up to $19,000 per year without having to pay any gift taxes. And again, this is another question I get is like, okay, what if I need to give my kid $25,000 or $100,000? Well, they still actually don't have to pay taxes on it. It just starts to count against this exemption amount. So you were to give a kid $100,000 this year. Well, the IRS says, hey, you got to file a document with us that says, I gifted $81,000 over my annual limit, and please deduct that from my 13.99. Okay. So as long as you're not gifting more than 13.99 million at any point in time, you're not going to have to worry about any gift taxes or any inheritance taxes. Now, if anyone on this call wins the lottery and is, a $500 million winner, then we're going to have some really serious conversations on, okay, how do we maximize this and minimize this, because the estate taxes are not kind, and quickly reach that top 40% tier. So again, I wanted to bring this up because people can get this mixed up and confused. And for the most average person, and even the 1%, they really don't have to worry about estate taxes. What you have to worry about is the taxes that are paid on a asset level. So when the assets are transferred, the actual transfer process, you don't really have to worry about estate taxes. However, depending on what assets are gifted, your heirs could potentially have to pay taxes on those assets. Okay. And the biggest example here is your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs that are pre-tax, have never been taxed before. If your kids were to inherit that, or anyone else for that matter, if they were to inherit that, because that money has never been taxed before, the IRS says, they have to pay taxes on it at their ordinary income rates. Okay. And back in 2019, they created a rule in the Secure Act of 2019 that says any retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, Roth IRAs as well, instead of being able to stretch your distributions over your lifetime like you could before, you now only have 10 years to withdraw all that money and pay the taxes on it. So they call it the 10-year rule. And how it works is, upon an individual's passing, a clock starts, and their heirs, if they were to inherit a retirement account or IRA, they have to pull all that money out within 10 years. And a lot of times this is pre-tax, so it can kick them into a higher tax bracket if we're not careful. So for your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs that haven't been taxed before, we want to be really strategic on how we distribute that money. A lot of times it can make sense to spread it out evenly over 10 years, but I've seen cases where it makes a lot of sense to all do it all at once in the year that you inherit it. I've seen cases where you want to wait a couple years and then you reach retirement, your income goes down, and then we start distributions. So there's a lot of planning there, right, that can be done. But with your pre-tax accounts, you're kind of stuck in handcuffs, if you will. There's not really much you can do because, again, that money's never been taxed before, and someone's going to have to pay taxes on it. Your Roth IRAs, which are tax-free, right? You've already paid taxes on them, and they grow tax-free. Even though the 10-year rule still applies, it makes life a lot easier because your heirs can just keep that money in the Roth IRAs for the 10 years, let it grow tax-free for 10 years, and then pull it all out in year 10 and not pay any taxes on it at all. Right? So if we're looking at it, the best asset to inherit is actually Roth IRAs because you get that 10 years of free tax-free growth. And the least favorable asset to inherit is actually your IRAs or any pre-tax retirement accounts. Okay. And for other accounts outside, or other assets outside of the retirement accounts, there is a feature in the IRS right now called a step up in basis. And what this means is that any investments, real estate, businesses, or anything, cryptocurrencies, you name it, what happens is, regardless of what you paid, your heirs will receive a step up in basis and be able to sell those assets tax-free upon your passing. So the example I'll give you is, you have your primary residence, you bought it for $100,000 30 years ago. It's now worth over $1 million. Right? If you were to go and sell that, you have a gain in there of $900,000 plus that you would have to pay some taxes on. But the IRS says when you pass away, they actually will step up your cost basis to what it was worth on your passing, to over $1 million. And then your heirs can sell that completely tax-free. Okay. So That is all investments outside of retirement accounts. So, like your brokerage accounts, that's real estate, businesses, you name it. So, if we're thinking about it on an asset level, right, the most valuable asset to inherit is the Roth. Next is these accounts, right? And those can be really sold tax free. The only one we really have to worry about taxes are the IRAs or the pre-tax accounts. Okay. And so, what does this mean from a planning perspective? Again, is we want to be strategic and say, okay, maybe we want to, if we have any charitable intent, we want to donate the IRA money to those charities and leave the rest of it for our kids or our grandkids because they'll get that tax free. And then your charity, because they're a 501c3, they don't have to pay any income taxes. They don't have to pay taxes on that money. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example here in just a second, but the last thing I'll say on transferring wealth is, especially with working with clients and seeing this all the time, the average inheritance is gone within 2 to 4 years. Um, Oftentimes I see it happen even faster than that. And the reality is, if you are able to communicate with your kids and even grandkids and talk to them at least on a broad level, you don't have to get specific, but if you at least talk to them and say, hey, I really hope that this money will do this for you, right? They are way more likely to actually honor that and hold on to that money and be good stewards of that money. Right. So I would highly encourage folks to have those conversations, and get them involved as much or as little as you'd like them to be involved. Obviously, you don't have to share numbers, but again, it's communicating and talking with them, and it's more likely that that money will not be spent quicker than or sooner rather than later. So to give you kind of an example or case study, this is, kind of a prototypical situation where you don't have to really worry about estate taxes. You more so have to worry about the taxes of the assets themselves. So on this example, Jane and John Doe, they have these assets. Your IRA is 1.5, your Roth IRA is 700,000, a joint brokerage or investment account of 2 million. They got their primary residence of 1 million, and then they also have a rental property that they manage of 350,000. Right? They've outlined to me in our conversations, they have some charities that they would like some of this money to go to, maybe about $500,000, and the rest they do want to go to their children and grandchildren. Right? What are the things that they need to be thinking about when they're starting to establish their estate plan? Well, first and foremost, the easy pickings is obviously we want to try to make sure that this $500,000 is taken from the IRAs. And there's different ways to do this. You can outline in your will or your trust that they carve out 500,000 from the IRAs specifically and donate that to the charity. Or you can even create a what we call a charitable IRA and have that set with beneficiary designations to those charities and leave the other million in a separate IRA that will go to your kids. Right? The easiest way is really just to put it in your estate planning documents. But that's the low hanging fruit, right? That's something that we can do, and that'll save tens, if not tens of thousands of dollars to your heirs by doing it that way. And then to navigate the rest of the conversation, right? Maybe we talk about, okay, well, you do have young grandchildren, right? What are the odds that they are mature enough to be able to handle that level of money? Right? And so then maybe we start to have the conversation on, should we establish a trust here for those grandkids? Or even the grandchildren. Again, or even the children. It just depends. And again, if we're thinking about it strategically, maybe we would want some of the Roth IRAs to go to the grandkids because the grandkids have more time on their side for compound interest, right? So that 10 years of tax-free growth is actually even more valuable for them than it is your kids because they have more time, right? So it's all these little things that we want to be strategic about, we want to think about to maximize the amount that your kids get tax-free and minimize the amount that Uncle Sam is able to pocket. So again, that was just an example. And I could talk for hours on wealth transfer and all different types of strategies. But if you have more questions or you kind of want to look at your case in particular, happy to have that conversation. Shifting gears just a little bit, and I know we're closing in on time already, but digital assets are becoming increasingly more important in today's day and world. Right? We live in a digital world, and it's only going to get more digital. And so if you look back 10, 15 years ago, and no estate planning documents included digital assets in their language, right? So nowadays, estate planning attorneys are getting a lot better at including it, but it's still not mainstream. And it's important because if your estate planning documents do not include digital assets or accounts, then any documents that you have saved online, photos and memories, social media or online accounts, like, getting into your Gmail account, right? I mean, that can be pretty important to pay bills and get into certain, access things, right? Or even cryptocurrencies and other digital assets, right? If they're not included in your estate plan, well, then your heirs are going to have a really, really tough time accessing any of this. And most of the time, it is lost forever. Right? So it's something that is important. And if your estate planning documents do not have any language that covers digital assets and accounts, what you can do is just add a codicil into your will or your trust that includes them. So it's just a quick update. It's very easy to include, and I would highly encourage that. Now, in response to this, and some backlash that Apple has faced, because Apple is very, very security driven, right? No matter what, if you are not the person that owns an Apple iPhone, Apple will not unlock that phone for you, no matter the circumstances. So Apple actually added a beneficiary designation on their phone that you can add and say, hey, if something were to happen to me, my spouse or my kid is able to get access to my phone. All right. So in the Q&A, maybe if anyone would like to go through this exercise, I can show folks how to do and add a legacy contact. And we can also send a link to anyone who attends after on how to do that. But it's easy. And then, again, on our phones, we keep so much critical information, and our lives are on these things now. You got to make sure that you're covering that as well. Okay. Finally, on the the digital asset front, I'm just going to play a quick video because I found that me trying to explain Everplans, I do a way worse job than just a quick 1-minute video here. So I'm gonna take my AirPods out. I'm gonna play this video and then come back to you.
Our lives are made up of so many things.
You hear that?
Days are filled with family, friends, work, daily tasks, obligations, and paperwork. Life is complicated. We do so much to take care of our families, try to get all the right things in place for them. We want them to be okay, no matter what. It's hard to stay on top of it all, and especially hard to keep everything organized. Everplans is here to help you. We're a secure and simple way to gather and store all of the most important things you need and your family really needs to know about. Everplans helps you identify and add important items like your most relevant financial information, like vital legal documents you've created, such as your will or power of attorney, as well as things that might never have occurred to you, such as the password for your password manager, how you pay your bills, the code for your phone, and the stories behind cherished family heirlooms, even house stuff, like how the brand new thermostat works. Our mission is to get you organized and provide your family peace of mind. By offering guidance, the Everplans platform helps identify any gaps you have in your planning or questions you may have in general and works towards a solution. Since sharing is a major part of the platform, you'll have the opportunity to choose Everplans deputies. These are trusted family members, advisors, attorneys, or close friends that only you can get permission to access your plan. If anything were to happen to you, your Ever plan is in place, ensuring everything is easily accessible for your family when they need it most. Our goal is to provide peace of mind throughout all aspects of your life, for you and your family. Get started now.
All right. So again, this is a tool that we pay for that is free to you. And everything I just covered the last 30 minutes, it is all null and void if your heirs cannot find any of these documents, right? So you got to be aware that you have to at least tell them where they are. And that's where Everplans can come in handy. We can embrace the technology and make everyone's lives a lot easier. And, we again have seen tons of cases where something happens, unfortunately, a husband, let's say, has a stroke and cannot really speak or communicate anymore. And that individual was responsible to pay all the bills and do all kind of the financial affairs. Well, um, as the wife, right, you have this emotional burden that you're going through, and then you can't figure out how to pay anything, and the power is getting cut off, and you can't access anything. That's not a pleasant experience to go through, right? So Everplans can help with that, and we actually had a webinar on Everplans too that we can send out to folks interested. But it's a really great tool that you guys have that you can utilize, right? Finally, I'm just going to wrap up here. As life changes, it can sometimes warrant a change in your estate plan, right? So what I like to tell folks is at least every 5 years, it's good exercise just to go in and say, hey, maybe ask your attorney and say, hey, should I update anything, right? Because life happens again, divorce, marriage, you can have kids, tax code changes can happen, legal changes can happen, right? So if you establish your documents 20 years ago and you never update them, chances are they're not going to be exactly how you envision them being, right? And even I've seen cases again, like I've said, where you maybe update your estate plan, but you forget about the beneficiary designations and that they actually supersede your will. So you update your will after going through a divorce, but you leave your ex-spouse on your 401k as a beneficiary. Well, unfortunately, there's no recourse, and that ex-spouse, whether you like it or not, is entitled to that money. So again, it's good exercise to go through. I would suggest just setting a reminder on your phone every 5 years that pings you and say, "Hey, let's take a look at this." And actually, our office has just recently started saying, on our accounts themselves, every 5 years we're going to ping you and say, "Hey, these are your current beneficiary designations. Do we need to make any updates? Have there been any changes?" So that's the gist of today's webinar. Again, there's a lot of complexity there. I was limited in time, so I only could cover so much. But we tried to, again, build a little bit of foundation with that estate planning 101, talk about estate or inheritance taxes and why that's something that most people probably won't ever have to worry about in their lifetime. What they will have to worry about is transferring wealth to that next generation and how to navigate that as best as possible, right? To ensure that next generation is being good stewards. And then in addition, covering our digital assets as well. Again, increasingly more digital world, it's becoming increasingly more important to do that, right? And so, just in conclusion, I'll open up to questions in here in just a second, but, our office are here to act as a resource, right? Again, I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice, but I can participate in these conversations. We can brainstorm ideas together. And if you'd like us to, I'm always happy to jump on a call with an estate planning attorney and kind of go through things on our end as well. So this is kind of our 360 life map, all the things that we help with clients, right? We kind of covered more so the legacy today, right? And making sure that all this is done. But that that again is what we're trying to add some value on, is not just the investments, not just the financial planning, not just the taxes, but everything, right? And that includes estate planning. So use us as a resource, and happy to help. So with that, I will open it up for questions. And
There was a question that wanted to be asked about your house and whether it should be included in the revocable trust to avoid capital gains tax. And this is for North Carolina.
yeah, so thank you for sending that question in. And the answer is, to avoid capital gains taxes on a house, you don't have to put it into a trust, right? Because regardless of if it's in a trust or it goes through your will and probate, either way, your heirs are still entitled to that step up in basis. Okay. So the reason why you would potentially want to put it in the trust is if, again, going back to those two reasons, you want to avoid probate altogether. And two, maybe you say, hey, this house needs to be sold, and then we want to control who gets what portion of it, right? Or we don't want to sell it quite yet, and we want that to be held into the trust, right? So again, it just gives you more control. But on a strictly tax front, there's no difference between not having it in a trust and having it in a trust. You still get that step up in basis either way, and your heirs receive that tax free. And I am going to go to this next slide just so I actually show the disclosures. Really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day. If you have any questions or you do want to get more specific, just reach out. We're just a phone call away, and again, happy to help.
If you ever have friends that you want to share these presentations with, feel free to send that to them. You hear a friend over, in a conversation somewhere saying, gosh, I'm just so confused about this, and you think this might help them, feel free to just send them our website, and they can dial down into the videos and resources. And so all of that's there as well.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.